Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you for calling me in this debate. Before I start, I'd like to declare my interest as a farmer, as a working farmer and a chartered surveyor. Now, when I drive through my constituency, I'm always reminded that farmers are the most underrated and essential workers in the rural Cotswolds and many other rural areas. Many have worked the land for generations, and I think in particular my constituent Nigel, I will avoid his surname to avoid press intrusion, who's still farming at the age of 93. What this government forgets is that farming is not a hobby. It is farmers that wake up at the crack of dawn to make sure that the rest of the population have food on their table. It is farmers that clear the roads when trees fall on them. It is farmers that clear the snow when they get blocked. And it is farmers who plant trees and wildflowers to ensure that our biodiversity is protected for future generations. Instead, the hard-working farmer community were dealt a massive blow by this Labour government's budget in October. It isn't, as my honourable friend from the front bench from Louth and Horncastle says, it's not only the AHT changes, but it's the national insurance contributions, the changes in minimum wage, the tax on fertiliser, and up to 211% tax on hike for double cab pickups. All these extra costs take money out of a business. And I know the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have both stated from the dispatch box that the IHT changes will not affect the vast majority of farms, with the Treasury forecasting that only 27% of all farms will be affected. However, as the honourable member of the Minister on the front bench knows, it is DEFRA's own forecasts that suggest that 2/3 of farms will be affected by this destructive policy. And the National Farmers Union have recently published analysis which show, in respect of the 27 figure, they found that this to be materially underestimating the true proportion, with around 75% of commercial farms to be affected by this destructive policy. This is due to the Treasury using figures that are based on the 21-22 APR data, which is not representative of the current situation today. We've already had an exchange in interventions, just let me make this point, about land prices. And I disagree with the honourable gentleman who said that these policies that inflate land prices. You can't buck the market. It's not these policies that inflate land prices. It's other people coming in from outside agriculture that are putting up the prices. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Is it not the case that the language the NFU used was that these are farms who may potentially be affected by the policy, and taking no account of estate planning or any other mitigations that people might use? As the Secretary of State said, people take action in the event of change, and the NFU has ignored that in quoting those statistics.
I appreciate the honourable gentleman's intervention. If he will just listen to my speech and listen to the examples that I'm about to give, then perhaps with an open mind he might change his mind on what he's just said. So, in addition, the Treasury does not include the impact of claims for business property relief, which also fits under the same £1 million ceiling. And according to the NFU, 40% of farmers also claim BPR on machinery and livestock. This makes the £1 million ceiling even more restrictive. And the government, as we had an exchange earlier, has failed to complete a proper impact assessment on the changes to APR and BPR on the rural economy. And the CLA have modelled, and I thought that honourable gentleman opposite might be interested in this, that these changes will lead to 5% of rural businesses closing, with up to 190,000 jobs being lost from the rural economy, and some in very remote and difficult areas to replace those jobs. I don't want to give away too many people, otherwise the Deputy Speaker will, but I'll give away once more to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful to the honourable gentleman. He mentions a risk that's of 5% of agricultural businesses being at risk. Is it not true that under the last government, between 2019 and 2024, in his own constituency of North Cotswolds, that there was an 8% reduction in agricultural businesses thanks to the policies of the opposition?
Period of a much longer time, but this will act much quicker. I can assure the honourable gentleman that once this tax starts to bite, those jobs will be lost quite quickly. So just to put this in perspective, the OBR has predicted that only £590 million a year is due to be raised from this destructive policy. The DWP budget in this government's budget and that pronouncement is a whopping £275.8 billion a year. So the revenue raised from this tax would be a mere 0.2% of this total amount. Now, over the weeks, I've had countless emails from worried farmers about their futures. And I was lucky enough to meet some of them who came up to London to protest recently. And I've met farmers who were varying in age from their late 20s to their early 90s. And it really was a very valuable meeting. Many of these farmers have never protested in their life, but they've chosen now to use their voices when their livelihoods are under threat. And again, to avoid press intrusion, I'd like to cite the case of David and his younger son, who farm a farm in the North Cotswolds of 265 acres with a suckler herd and 200 small flock of pedigree Dorset sheep. They have a range of modern and traditional buildings, and they've already diversified their buildings. And when they include their house, they estimate that their business is worth £5.5 million. He would be entitled to about £1.5 million in relief, and after the 50% relief from inheritance tax, with an effective rate that the Honourable Economic Secretary from the Treasury went through these rates, would leave him with a taxable amount of £800,000 on his death. Now, that farmer only earns, and the Minister might like to listen to this, he earns in total, on average, about £40,000 a year. How on earth is he ever expected to pay the tax and live on that £40,000? He won't, and the farmer will have to sell up, and it won't be available for future generations. I'll give way. That's the last time I'm giving way.
Honourable Gentleman, but wouldn't the Tories have a lot more credibility on this issue if they owned up to the disaster that was Brexit, to the opening up of cheap imports, increased costs for farmers, all the barriers and obstacles towards trading? Wouldn't they have much more credibility in attacking this government on this if they admitted this was an absolute disaster for farming communities?
If the honourable gentleman wants to call an adjournment debate on Brexit, he's entitled to do so. So, I was talking about the serious issue about how this farmer and many other farmers up and down the country are going to be able to afford this tax. They will not be able to do so. And I understand that the government has suggested that farmers should be forward planning and gifting their farms to their children now. That would mean that they could avoid the tax in the future. But for many farmers, this is not an option. Take another constituent of mine who farms near the Foss Way. He's still farming at 93 and is still working on his farm. He did not retire at 65 like many of us do, but has kept working the long, hard days, as he did during the Second World War, to ensure we have enough food on our table. He has spent years planning to ensure that his grandchildren could inherit and take over the farming business. Instead, this government has put his plan completely out of the window because he will have to live to 101 if he's able to avoid this tax altogether. So the only option facing many farmers across the country is to sell off their land and stop farming. These farmers have worked the land for generations, and their children will have grown up watching their parents take over, expecting to take over when they can, but now face a future of uncertainty. What the government fails to answer is that when this land goes on the market, what kind of person will buy it? It won't be the ones that have farmed the land all their life. It will be likely to be foreign investors and hedge fund managers. They will not have generations of knowledge to work this land and will likely take prime arable land out of production as they could possibly make more money from alternatives. So working on the previous Public Accounts Committee, and I do urge the Minister to listen to this and ask him to see whether he would pledge to do it, I managed to obtain a commitment from the last government that the Food Security Index would be published in Parliament every year. I would like the Minister to give that pledge that he will continue doing that, so we can see what effect this tax is having, what effect the selling off of farms is having, taking land out of production, and whether our food production is dropping or not. I'd like to end this speech with a plea to the government to go back to the drawing board. I understand that a technical tax consultation on these changes is due to be published early in 2025, and I urge the government to use this time to talk to farmers and professionals across the country and find a way that will ensure that farmers like Nigel do not lose their life's work to the taxman. Some obvious alleviations of changes to APR and BPR would be to raise the threshold so more smaller-owned and rental farmers would be exempt, and a longer transitioning period that will help farmers like Nigel, the 93-year-old, and that, however, the best outcome would be to reverse this policy altogether. Farming is under threat. I do not want to see the fabric of our countryside destroyed for future generations.